I'm Stephanie Chaikin. I'm the director of the Center for the Arts at New Jersey City University, and I would like to welcome you to our series of discussions on creative process. Thank you so much for being here. Today we have an amazing conversation with our poet laureate of Jersey City and favorite son alum, Rashad Wright. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about our moderator, Dr. Edwidge Junta. Dr. Junta is an award-winning educator with huge numbers of fans. And she's also an acclaimed writer and editor. Among others, her books include Teaching Italian-American Literature, Film, and Popular Culture and Personal Effects, Essays on Memoir, Teaching and Culture in the World of Louise DeSalvo. And Dr. Junta was awarded the OSIA Book Club Selection for Italian-American Writers on New Jersey and the Educator of the Year Award for the Higher Education category from the Association of Italian-American Educators, among many others. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Edwidge Junta.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you so much for all the work and this wonderful collaboration that we have initiated. It's such a pleasure to work with the NJCU Center for the Arts. So this event is the result of the work that we have been doing as a community, as an NJCU community over the years. It's brought by the NJCU Center for the Arts and the English Department Student Events and Publications Committee, a collaborative effort between the students and faculty members and also alums. And actually, I want to encourage those among you who are still students at NJCU, or even if you graduated, to reach out to me. We're going to be planning more events for the spring, and we look forward to your input, whether you would like to get actively involved in the organization, or even if you just have some ideas for some events. So reach out to me. My email is ejunta@njcu.edu. So let me just say a couple of basic questions about the format before I introduce our speaker. The format, I'll be introducing Rashad, and I will be asking some questions. He will give us the gift of his poetry, and you will have an opportunity also to ask questions. I want to thank Holly Hesley, who is helping out here. She's going to be selecting some questions that you will post in the chat room. And I want to remind especially the students, the chat is a public space, so everybody can see what you post. So use it specifically for questions and comments concerning Rashad's poetry. One of the great pleasures of my life as a teacher is to welcome back a former student who is now doing the kind of work that as a teacher you dream of, you hope that the student will do. And when I first met Rashad in an American literature class, and I started hearing what his ideas, his thoughts, his way of reading literature was, I thought, I better get out of the way and let him do what he needs to do. And it was an incredible learning experience for me as a teacher to be able to work with these extraordinarily gifted poets. So Rashad graduated in 2018, and the same year he became the Jersey City Poet Laureate, the first since 2004. He was only 24 at the time. Here at NJCU, he studied creative writing, but he was also involved in many, many activities, and especially in the peers, educating peers program, where he was a certified peer educator. He was a Grand Slam champion of Jersey City Slam twice, and he also participated and was recognized in many local and national slam competitions. And in 2018, when he participated in individual poetry slam in San Diego, California, he was recognized as 20th in the country. He's the author of many chapbooks and a wonderful book of poems, his first book of poems, Romeo's Whiskey. And he's been in residence since 2018 at Mana Contemporary, where he organizes and hosts many poetry events. So it's very, very exciting to welcome Rashad back to NJCU. So Rashad, where are you? Can we see you?
What's up, everybody? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Can
but
you
I don't think,
me?
yeah, now we see you. Yeah,
Okay.
welcome back, Rashad.
Nice to be back. Thank you, Eddie.
Oh,
Oh, that was such a heartfelt introduction. Thank you so much. Yeah.
well, you know, we are going to try to get as much as we can out of you today. Poetry, we want answers to questions. So we're going to take advantage of every moment. And I am teaching some of Rashad's poems in my class, Dark Stories for Young Adults, because poetry tell powerful stories, and certainly Rashad tells some incredible stories. So I'm going to ask you some questions. And what I'm going to ask again, remind our audience, please post your questions for Rashad on chat and just be patient. And after, in a little while, then we will select as many questions as we can, and Rashad can answer them. So Rashad, community has always been very important to you. Even when you were a student at NJCU, it was so clear, whether it was in the classroom or events, that you supported, encouraged, and celebrated the success of your peers.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us why community is important to you? And also perhaps, can you tell us what kind of communities you need as a poet?
Okay. Well, community is like really important to me because growing up, I felt like, all right, so I started for example, I started the cross country team at NJCU. And for the first 2 years, I was the only runner. So I didn't have a coach. I didn't have teammates. So anytime I did get companionship, camaraderie, or people that supported me, I nurtured that to the best of my ability because I was so accustomed to spaces where I didn't have community, and to know that people were passionate about the same things that I could do, and there was something that I could do to bring the best out of them. How dare I not put my best foot forward in helping someone do everything I like doing too. And that happened to translate on campus, and me putting together a whole bunch of different shows and open mics, because I always wanted a stage to perform on, and I didn't always have that. So I said, hey, why not make one? And then I had my own stage, and now I'm making stages for other people. So I'm like, okay, mission accomplished.
Indeed, mission accomplished. So do you think poets can just work all alone, absolute solitude, or do you need your community?
I've never worked just alone. As a poet, I've always identified as a performer. And as a performer, we can't exist without having someone to listen to us, without having an audience. So, and you know, even as a poet, even just as a writer, you still have a relationship with your reader, with an audience. It just looks different and may feel different. And no matter how lonely the experience may be, it's reliant on someone else.
Thank you. Well, let me ask you a question that kind of develops this idea of the relationship that writers need to cultivate with others. So the writers that inspire us or infuriate us are also part of that community. And you have always talked about the role of the writers who have affected your work, and you have singled out some of them, like Nikki Giovanni, Sonia Sanchez, Baraka, in your, and you know, even you even mention them, even in your chapbooks, you acknowledge these writers. So this is something that seems to have been very clear to you from the very beginning of your writing career. Could you talk a little bit about how you view this relationship with the writers who have affected your work? And this could include living writers and dead writers. So the relationship in terms of influence, reaction, tribute, or revision. And here I'm thinking of how you amazed me when in that class, in the first class that you took, we had all these very lively conversations about Faulkner, and then you handed in the chapbook titled Laughter, a really remarkable literary revision in response to the sound of the sea.
Thank you for that. Looking back, since that chapbook, every book I've written, every project I've written, this is the first time I'm actually like putting this into words and thinking about it, but has been an homage to a different body of work. Romeo's Whiskey is an homage to a Claudia Rankine Citizen. Even just the cover is similar, where Claudia Rankine has like an all-white background and Trayvon's hoodie, plastered as if it was a museum, in a museum. And that same way I posted my helmet in the cover of Romeo's Whiskey. I wrote a different book that I didn't publish yet that was modeled after American Born Chinese, which is a graphic novel. So yeah, every body of work I've written thus far has been in homage, a conversation with some writer that I read and felt very strongly about. William Faulkner, that piece I happen to have, the Luster chapbook was probably a contest or a challenge to The Sound and the Fury. Meanwhile, I think Romeo's Whiskey is a compliment to Citizen. And I think my next book is going to be a compliment to American Born Chinese. But yeah, my books are just conversation with writers. That's exactly what it is. I never thought of it that way until now, but yeah.
I hope that my students are hearing this. So one of the things actually I would like to ask to follow the question is, you know, as teaching creative writing, sometimes one of the challenges I encounter is that the students who are at the beginning of the writing experimentations, they want to write, but they don't want to read other writers. How important is it to read other writers for a writer?
For me, it was reading other people's work was so hard for me. I had so much to say about how much I hated or had challenges or with whatever writing or material we read in class. But what helped me get over that was realizing that the classroom can be like much more inclusive to literature. Like I just said, American Born Chinese is a graphic novel. That's something I wouldn't normally read in the classroom. But I happen to have had a very open-minded professor in EC2 that had us read a graphic novel as part of our curriculum. And I was like, oh, wow, a comic book belongs in the classroom. And that allowed me to say, oh, I do these slam poems, I go to these competitions. This doesn't feel like it belongs in the classroom, but if I can read a comic book in the classroom, why can't my slam be in the classroom? So for students, I'd like them to have an open mind about what they think literature is, because literature can be anything, can be of everything. And I'm glad to have had professors that were open-minded enough for me to realize that, because then you feel like you belong in the conversation as a writer, which was like my biggest hurdle stepping into or even becoming an English creative writing major. I had 6 majors before I stepped into English because I thought I didn't belong in the classroom.
Well, we are certainly glad that you found your way to creative writing.
Me too.
So you mentioned Romeo's Whiskey, an important accomplishment, an extraordinary first book. And I was really glad that you talked about not just, that you talked actually about the book as a physical production, and what goes into conceptualizing and then realizing the book as in terms of also its visual presentation. Could you tell us a little bit about Romeo's Whiskey, the initial idea for the book, the process of putting it together, and then how the whole process of going into production? I think this can be extremely interesting, especially for writers who have not published the work yet. You know, we're accustomed to seeing finished books. And so all that hard labor that goes into the production of the book becomes invisible. So could you take us behind the scene and tell us about the whole process?
Okay. Two things. First off, Romeo's Whiskey was not my first choice. I was working on the homage to American-born Chinese first. It was sort of like a kid's storybook with poetry in between it. And I had a graphic novel. I had a graphic artist working on that with me. That fell through the cracks, but I was so hyped. I was so gassed to see all of those poems together that I put together a completely different collection. And that's what Romeo's Whiskey is, that second collection, which was it's half memoir, half poetry. Most of the memoir was written in your class. Most of the poetry was written in the last 2 years. And Claudia Rankine's book, Citizen, which this is based off of, was like random moments of multiple people's lives. And Romeo's Whiskey is random moments of my life. So I borrowed that format and condensed it into one person's scope, into one person's vision, one person's narrative. So that's like the writing. That was the concept of the book. As far as physically publishing it, I didn't want to self-publish, and I wanted to support a local Black-owned business. So I published with Rebel Inc. in Newark, New Jersey. And I had one editor. He looked at all my poems. He looked at all my pieces. He helped me arrange them. He said, these might go work here. These might not work there. I didn't even want to have a glossary in there because I wanted it to read as if it was a book instead of a collection. He said, put in a glossary. It'll help your readers navigate the book and possibly hold on to different pieces. And yeah, the thing about going with a small printing company, you still have so much creative control over what goes into it, opposed to going with a bigger or larger publishing company where I would assume you have less creative domain. That's an avenue I haven't gone down yet. It's one I would like to, just to get that experience. But yeah, I was not self-published, and having an extra eye meant the world to me. And I would not mind self-publishing. I do recommend it. But for me as a writer, that middle ground of a small publishing company worked pretty well.
Thank you. I think we're all ready for some poetry.
Okay.
Okay.
So Eddie, what poems did I read? What did you provide the class with?
Well, whether they're monsters and Black Runner Boy and also basketball, and whatever you want to offer us, we will be very happy.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Perfect. I'll read a poem that I still perform to this day, and it's something I wrote in Dr. Bumis's class. It's called Titled Document. But can y'all hear me clearly? Okay. I just want to say right off the bat that this isn't really a poem, because like poems are like really dark often, and people don't really like us dark things. I should know I'm usually the darkest thing in the room. I'm usually like some living, breathing metaphor, just walking around in a pile of flesh. So I just hold my breath, because I know there may be some plot twist waiting for me on the other side of an exhale. So I'm not going to be a poem. No, poems are too short-lived. I'm not going to be short-lived. I'm going to be a beautiful thing. It's going to have afros and roses, and there won't be any poems all dead and stuff on my sidewalks with their candlelit curbside caskets. I don't need any poems in jail or sick or misdiagnosed or lynched or bloody or beaten or drunk or high or dying. You won't be crying over any poems in this piece. I said this piece is going to have so much love and basketball in between its lines. And yes, this piece is going to sound like it's a poem. And it may even be a poem. But I'm not going to let you call this piece. I mean me. I'm not going to let you call me anything other than my name. Thank you. That was titled Document. How many more pieces should I read, Eddie?
Good. You at least 4 or 5.
4 or 5, too easy. Okay, so one thing I went through while I was at NJCU was I was a student, and I had multiple jobs. I was a lifeguard and a swim teacher on campus. I worked in peers educating peers, and I was also a soldier in the National Guard. So yeah, during the weekends, I would go to drill, be in uniform, and last year I almost deployed, and I happened not to because I was named Poet Laureate. And this poem is something I wrote right before my unit was deployed, and it's called In Step. This is a performance piece, so it's weird not being able to perform this. You'll understand why. Left, yo left, left, right, yo left, you got it, left, yo left, left, right, yo left, you got it, left, right, yo left. When us soldiers march, we lead with our left foot. So when every boot in the platoon hits the ground, the sound is so in sync that even our hearts begin to beat to the same rhythm and rhythm. Even in your dying breath is the only thing you have left. Right, your left, so smooth. Left, woo, right, your left. And then the right foot follows. And this is always some desperate pursuit, struggling to keep up, just like all the things us soldiers tend to leave behind. Nevertheless, you'd be surprised to see how much gets left right behind in the rhythm. You'd be surprised to see how we still dance, how we still march when even under gunfire, because see, dancing and marching and all of this becomes so easy when the beat has always been there. And you think that beat is always going to be there until one day it's just not. And that'll be the day all the breathing finally stops. It'll be the day someone does a left, right, left, all in your breath and up and down your chest. You won't know the difference between your left and your right. And you won't know the difference between your right and your wrong. And you won't know the difference between right and whatever it is you have left right when you need it. Right when you realize these bullets have been calling you by your first name. Right when you realize you've been marching in place this whole time. Right when you realize you don't have a single thing left. Right, your left. Left. Right, your left. Left. Right. Left. Yeah, that's In Step. That's the first time I've performed that poem without being out of breath at the end of it. It's a performance piece, meaning that is a performance piece, and Monsters is a performance piece, meaning that when you see them on stage, when they perform, that's the medium it's meant to be communicated in. If I was to translate that on paper, it would look very differently and probably communicate something very differently. While I perform that poem, I'm usually marching the entire time, keeping in step with the lines and the words. Yeah, I love having conversations about the difference between performance and good poems, because any poem can be performed well. That doesn't make it a performance piece, but a performance piece is a piece that only thrives on stage. I teach and coach performance, and I teach the difference between the two. And yeah, this next poem is a piece that I performed when I was named Poet Laureate, and it is not a performance piece. Hopefully it's a poem that I can perform well. I haven't read this in like since then, so I have to read this off screen. Yeah. It's called How I Would Introduce Myself If I Wasn't 5 Foot Awkward. My name is Rashad, which means one who is always on the right path. And yet I've taken more wrong turns than white newlyweds in horror movies. I'm the oldest of three. So at one time, there were two little girls who looked just like me and sat through every one of my shows, so they knew all 152 Pokemon before they knew the alphabet had a final letter. I can swim a lap on a chewed up breath, can run 2 miles in about 12 minutes, and if you give me a bicycle, I'll make a car think it was a skateboard. I fall in love with anyone who listens past the third word. I don't believe in capital letters. I believe in equal opportunity, and I'm pretty sure that Tupac lives in Jersey City. And I will never shower before getting into a pool. It defeats the purpose. I'm my mother's son. So when I rise, it's her shine in my eyes, and she raised my voice Christian. So every poem has at least one amen in it. Can I get an amen? Because back in the days, I believed in God. Then I believed in myself. Nowadays, I dream big enough to try believing in both at the same time. I'm kind of allergic to nuts. I wear dog tags. I act like it's a rosary. I know my right side. I don't know my left. I've done more sports than states I've been to. I fight hard and love hard enough to break my own heart in half. I'm National Guard, so I'm part-time soldier, full-time pissed off. I've fired more bullets than hands. I've shook. I've shot so many guns, and I've had so many guns in my mouth. I could spit out a full clip. So when I love someone, trust, I hold them with a full grip, and I'm bad at lying. And sometimes I'm worse at dealing with the truth. And the truth is, I feel like a car accident that keeps waking up in the morning. And the morning is never done. No matter how many yesterdays I've had, I'm good. And so many things can do them all with a whole family tree tied behind my back and still feel like a small fish on a really big table. I can make my skin into gold and still call it rust. I'm a dragon that denies its own flame. My voice is a fairy tale I still can't believe in. I hate talking about myself, but I'm really good at all the things I hate. And most times I hate myself so much that tomorrow always feels like a miracle sent to the wrong address. I mean, we all know the saying, practice makes perfect, and I've done so much breaking and made my broken look so good you couldn't fix it if you tried. But all of that aside, my name's Rashad Wright, and you have no idea how nice it is to meet you. Woo. Did you guys get all that? Yeah. That one takes a little bit out of me. Breath, emotion, all that. I think vulnerability, transparency is very important in my work. I don't know where I picked this up. I think it may be just me rephrasing something I may have heard in your class, but I feel like the best writing is three-dimensional writing. So all of my poetry, I try not to just capture one emotion. I try to capture all of the emotions about whatever topic I'm talking about. So like when I'm talking about being in the military in step, I'm also talking about me dancing while I'm marching. I'm still talking about me being in rhythm. In that poem, I'm still talking about my sisters. I'm talking about how much fun we have. I'm talking about the races that I used to run with buses on bicycles. I'm also talking about how hard it is for me to go to drill, how hard it is for me to be a soldier in the military, you know? I love the idea of three-dimensional writing. I try that in all of my pieces, and that's a part of the reason why I love performing so much, because it allows me to encapsulate more of the feelings that I think are on paper, but I can embody that in person as well. Yeah. So I think so any poem can be performed well, and a part of a poem being performed well includes it being three-dimensional. What else should I read? I also I'm also in a band, so I perform with music. And this week, I just linked up with a, man, a contemporary during my residency. We're doing a mural, so I'm gonna have my a poem I wrote plastered on the wall, and it's spread up into different pieces. And yeah, so that's a new medium I'm stepping into. This piece I wrote, it's called Out Loud. It's in my book, Romeo's Whiskey, and I wrote it with the intention that people that don't perform may get that nostalgia, may get that catharsis that I get from reading and performing. You may not be a great writer. You may not be a writer. I think everyone could be a writer, but you may not call yourself that. But whether or not, I think anyone could be a good performer. And I wrote this poem for people to perform or practice performing, and it's called Out Loud. So if you have the book, if you ever get it, if you don't have the book and you want me to send it to you, I'll send it to you. I don't care. Yeah, but I'm going to read it right now. When you read this out loud, make sure everyone can smell the thorns on your breath. Make this fairy tale think it was daily news. Wrap every syllable in rose petals and say, I do. When you read this out loud, say, I can't believe it's not butter. When reading this, say, I'm sorry. Apologize to the ground for walking all over it. Say, I've been there before. Say it like you're there right now. Swallow your voice as if it tasted like something worth believing in. When reading, speak like it was your first words. When you read this out loud, get louder. Be loud enough to tell the night sky it doesn't know what real darkness is. Loud enough to sing lullabies to the stars. Loud enough to tell silence to speak up for itself. When you read this out loud, tell your footsteps, been there, done that, ain't going back. When you read this out loud, go back. Take it from the top. Read it until every mistake starts calling itself good enough. Read this until you start calling yourself good enough. This poem says you're good enough, says there are wings in every one of your words. This poem thinks your voice looks like home. This poem knows you had it rough, was there with you, has been under your breath, has been that shine in your eyes. This poem doesn't rhyme, but neither do you. When you read this out loud, dance so hard. The poem thinks you're a DJ. When you read this out loud, be your own encore. Treat every line like a world premiere. After you read this out loud, take a moment of silence for the person you used to be. When reading this out loud, you're a poet. When reading this out loud, you have a name, a moment, and something that needs to be said. After reading this, read it louder. And that's out loud.
Thank you, Rashad. Maybe we'll try to, shall we do some questions, and maybe you can give us another couple of poems before we close. We still have some time. That was really incredible, so powerful. And
thank you.
I just want to recognize, and maybe you could talk about that, about the incredible challenge of coming together as a community in a virtual space and not having the physical space where we are in the same room, where we can later talk to each other. I mean, we were talking, it's interesting, we're talking about three-dimensional, now we meet on a flat screen. Could you talk a little bit about what that has been like for you as a performer to have to switch? And and while Rashad answers this question, I wanna remind our audience that this is if you have any questions, and my students, don't be shy, because we're going to be talking about Rashad this Thursday. Actually, have student presentations about your work. So this is your opportunity to ask questions to Rashad about his work, about any of the poems they shared with us. So tell us a little bit about this, this very strange transition that we have been forced into, and how you have approached it as a performer?
At first, I was like in the biggest rut possible. Because when I published the book, Romeo's Wish, the one-man play that was going to accompany a lot of the work that's in there is like a compliment to it. And I did one showing and started booking shows up until September, and they all got canceled. And that was back in March. And I was so sad. I was so proud to finally have my first book out. And then I said, oh man, what do I do now? I hooked up with a few art galleries and performed them there where they streamed them virtually. So I still had a stage to perform on, just no audience. Aside from that, I started hosting a couple of virtual open mics on Instagram for a few weeks. And then I came back to Jersey City because I was in the suburbs with my family. And I started working. Honestly, literally my practice I've maybe written a poem once a month during the summer. Just now, my band and I have finally started performing. We did our first block party last week, like 3 days ago. So I'm starting to hit stages. I've been performing at protests, which is nice because those are actually the first stages I've been on. So it felt like a 360. That's why I started performing via rebellion, via hard times, via oppression, you know. That was my outlet. That was where my voice came from. And it took a lot to put me back in that space, but I'm glad to be here again, start back at rock bottom and glad to be here, you know. But yeah, it is very hard for me as a performer to thrive in the virtual realm. This is the first Zoom call I've been on since June. Yeah. And I think that was at graduation. Yeah, it was the last time I was on Zoom.
We hear you. I think you know, we all live in different ways to reinvent ourselves and our relationships. But I think for someone who thrives on performance, creativity, so bound up with performance, it certainly must pose extraordinary challenges. But you're meeting them incredibly well.
I'm glad you think so. Thank you. But I've dropped the ball multiple times the last few months, and I'm trying to be okay with that, trying to be able to forgive myself, you know. Yeah.
Always very important. Holly, do we have any questions?
Yes. Hi, Rashad.
Hey, Holly.
Jade! I'm glad to see you. I'm really glad to be able to do, you know, this event with you. I haven't seen you on campus.
I've been on campus with all y'all. It was crazy.
Yes, Rashad's been amazing. Let's get to some questions. All right, Josh asks, could you say more about three-dimensional writing? Talk about that process.
Well, I write with not like necessarily the intention of performing, but the understanding that I am a host, that I am an MC, that people will feel something based on my writing. And I'm very aware of the emotions I may invoke in my pieces. And I try to, like, for example, a black runner boy. No, older basketball is a great example of this. I start off joking, and then I get into the heritage of basketball. And, like, you know, I never feel or communicate one way or one emotion about any topic. It's not even me trying to display both sides to an argument. I'm just saying a person can feel a plethora of ways about one thing. And I think that's so human. And I think art or poetry or my favorite poems or art pieces capture humanity and symbolize all those emotions you can go through in one idea, you know? So yeah, that's what I'm talking about when I say three-dimensional writing. Three-dimensional writing for me is just all encapsulating of the human experience.
All right, great answers. Amazing. Next question. So this is from Khadijah. So she asks, is it obvious from some of your performances like Monsters and Black Runner Boy that your work comes from a personal place of experience and hardship? It's not very easy to write something from the heart, especially when it's something painful. So do you have any advice for writers to help them embrace writing their experiences?
Yes. My literal journey was on campus. I worked with peers educating peers. We did a lot of work around mental health and advocacy. So I went through one-on-one counseling in the counseling center for like 4 or 5 years. And then I also was in like a group setting with a lot of my fellow peer mentors of PEP. And it even got to the point that at a certain point, they allowed me to start teaching weekly writing workshops at PEP. So I was doing mental health work and writing all in the same space. So of course, that vulnerability, that transparency that I learned from mental health would translate into my work because they were born and bred in the same lane. If you go to NJCU, you have access to free counseling, which I recommend. Yeah, I had to, before it hits the stage, there's a huge process behind each and every piece that I'm open to reading that I no longer have to go through, but yeah, it did take me some time to be as vulnerable and open as I am now.
That's great that you mentioned the importance of kind of recognizing the mental health aspect of that because, you know, it comes from a very raw place. So thanks for speaking about that. All right, so Katie has a question. What or who is your #1 inspiration to write?
Right now in this moment, there's this guy from the slam poetry community. His name's Reedy Francisco. He has a book out. It's called Helium. And we actually slammed together when I went to Spokane, Washington. And he beat me. And I've been watching his videos and reading his books much more intently ever since then. So in the slam community, it's Reedy Francisco. As a writer, it is Claudia Rankine, Citizen. That's my favorite book from Claudia Rankine.
Nice. So this kind of goes in line with the idea of performing and building community. So Joy asks, how did you transition from writing poems to performing them? In other words, how does one get involved in the local poetry community and build connections with other artists? So you have a lot of experience, you know, with performing in Jersey City. So you want to talk about that?
Right. Yeah. Open mics. First off, most of my first performances were on campus because I started, my first reading ever was senior year of high school, towards the end of high school. So I didn't do much before college. When I hopped on college and I heard about events that was going on, when there were open mics, I said, sign me up, where are they? And then I started saying, okay, this isn't enough for me. On campus, they probably do a open mic like once a month. Then I started looking up local open mics and finding other venues and places to perform. Nowadays, well, in this moment, there aren't any live open mics you can attend, but the virtual realm makes open mics a lot more accessible. So I was hosting an open mic. I know a couple of venues hosting open mics, and you can be on the same stage with someone on the other side of the world right now. So this is the first time that a new artist could have that experience. Open mics are great for poets and writers.
I think one of them used to perform at TNJ.
That's right. That's right. My old team, Jersey City Slam, was based out of TNJ.
Yes. Awesome. All right, let's go to another question. All right. Ooh, this is interesting. This is from Giancarlos. Were you ever shamed or silenced about your pride and soul in your poems?
Yes. I'm ex-military, so there were things I couldn't talk about and things I couldn't say. But still, you know, I broke down every month with my peer group, and they picked me back up, put all my pieces back together. All my classmates did. But at a certain point, I was able to be a host for NJCU's coming out day. I spoke at the Lavender graduation several times. And yeah, there are a lot of different things that I have a very hard time talking about. And I was shamed and bashed. And yeah, I was like, at a certain point, even my living situation was in jeopardy because of my identity as a writer. So yes, I wouldn't say I was shamed, but writing has been very difficult for me. Yeah.
Wow.
But I'm still doing it. Yeah.
I'm glad you're still doing it. Keep doing it. Keep on keeping on.
Let's take maybe one or two more questions, and then we'll ask Rashad to do another poem, and then we'll bring it to a close.
Okay, so this one comes from Gregory. So he says, has the speaker encountered much negative treatment on grounds of mental health? Is the situation getting any less bad than the past? Do you feel Afro-Americans and whites get the same degree of negative treatment, or is it worse for Afro-Americans? Also, do you feel it is trickier to cover health issues or political issues in poetry, or does the heavy stuff go down well?
There's a lot there. One thing, I'll probably backtrack through this question, but one thing I do definitely think is that as far as resources in communities and what people have access to is a big deal. I don't think people of color, for the most part, have access to a lot of mental health resources. Personally, I only had access to mental health resources because one, I was in college, and two, I was only in college because I was able-bodied enough to enlist in the military to fund my education. So if I wasn't someone that was in shape, or if I wasn't a student athlete, I wouldn't have been to school, and I would have never had therapy and or counseling. Even being in school, there is such a big, I'm not sure what other cultures go through this, but I can speak for the Black community, there is a huge stigma about stepping into the mental health realm, about others perceiving you as crazy or having challenges or problems that you would not want to confront. Even today, I don't have health insurance right now, so I'm not getting counseling right now. And on top of that, if I did have an accident, I'm not sure what I would do to seek medical attention. Yeah. So, I mean, I can't speak for anyone else's experience, but I can say as an African-American male, I am only where I am because I happen to be able-bodied. And even with that, I still don't have health insurance, or I'm the poet laureate of Jersey City, you know? Yeah. I hope that answers your question, or if there's anything that you missed, anything else you want to hear from me about that, let me know. Because I don't even see that question.
That was a great answer. And yeah, thank you for articulating all of that, because I know it's, you know, we got to think about these things and the intersectionality of our identities and how that affects us as writers, as humans. So let's go to Eddie. You said one more question?
Yes, just one more.
Okay, this is gonna be tough. Alrighty. Let's see. All right. So this person, Brenda, she asks, when and how did you know that it was that you loved and that you wanted to do it in your future, meaning poetry? I mean, what was your inspiration to continue with your career? I think especially since you mentioned that, you know, you've gone through what, like 6 majors before you went to creative writing?
Yeah. Like I said, there are a few moments where everything clicked for me. like I said earlier, I didn't believe that my voice or people that wrote like me or people that said things like me belonged in the classroom. So I was like, okay, I love poetry and slam and competing and performing, but there's no slam poetry major, you know? And then I took that EC2 class. I read American Born Chinese. I saw a graphic novel in the curriculum. I said, okay, maybe I should look into this a little bit more. Then I had Dr. Sonia Donaldson, who was teaching African American literature. And I was like, oh, I already know most of these writers. And then I took Modern and Contemporary American Lit with Eddie. And instead of writing an essay as a final paper, she let me write a book. So I was like, okay, so I guess my work can belong here, does have space. And I was validated. Aside from that, when I fell in love with poetry and performing, there was a show. I wrote about this last night, a brand new poem I just wrote. I was the opening act to a one-woman play that was in the Margaret Williams Theater. It was called Brownsville Bread. And I read one poem. It was like 3 minutes long. And that was the first time, that was the only time I got a standing ovation in a full room. And I was like, whoa, I've never felt this way. I've never been so confident. And I've never seen those 500 people a day in my life, but they're the reason why I'm chasing that feeling all over again, you know? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Extraordinary and inspiring answers, because there are many writers at the beginning of their journey and stay the course to hear the words of writers, especially writers who are so committed to community as you are, can be really incredible, can be very, very inspiring. And it also, I think, I speak, I believe, on behalf of the NJCU community, that we have played a small part in hearing your voice and supporting you. It's certainly something that makes us feel good. And you know, you became a poet laureate at 24. I mean, you got the kind of recognition that poets get very late in life, if ever. You know, poetry is not the most recognized genre in our culture, but you represent it as in a way that is very powerful and very open. You invite us all in. So I'm going to ask you if you bring us to the close of this event, giving us one more poem.
Okay. Because I definitely have a lot to say about what you just said, but I'm just going to stick to time and read this last poem. But I definitely want to say thank you to everyone that's been in the class with me, everyone that's been in some crowd at NJCU or in G-Sub, and all my professors. This last piece is called Heaven's Wakanda. This is the piece that's going on the mural. So I had this dream, right? And in the dream, well, first off, us black people don't usually live long enough to have dreams, but I had this dream, and I know it's a dream because I'm with my cousin, and he's in jail. He killed these two guys, but in the dream, they're there with me and him, and we're just running around like kids playing so late that the street lights haven't woken up yet. And in the dream, I have no idea where we are, but we're like in Wakanda, if like Wakanda was in heaven. And in heaven's Wakanda, everyone says, wow, I can't believe it's not meat. In heaven's Wakanda, Blade pays his taxes. In heaven's Wakanda, OJ doesn't put the glove on. In heaven's Wakanda, Chadwick Boseman just crossed over Kobe Bryant on some basketball court. In heaven's Wakanda, little Rudy Huxtable can still love her father. In this heaven, my father can still play basketball the way he did before they put pins in his knees. In this heaven, my dad can hold a ball up to a night sky as if it was his only son, and there aren't any Mondays in this heaven. Here, Scorpios have their own heaven. Everyone else calls it hell. In heaven's Wakanda, everyone speaks their own language. Here, snakes have wings. We call them dragons. The Nets are still in Jersey. The McRib isn't a thing. In heaven's Wakanda, Game of Thrones only has 7 seasons. In heaven's Wakanda, there's no Cash Me Outside girl. There's Obamacare. In heaven's Wakanda, we call heaven right now. Everyone dances on beat. Popcorn comes with a seat. Heaven's Wakanda has parking spots as far as the eye can see. Here, we don't call them happy endings. We just call it real life. And there aren't any dreams in this heaven, or at least not American ones. You are the dream. And here, heaven has nothing to do with religion. In heaven's Wakanda, everyone tells their children, I was the coolest kid in high school. In heaven's Wakanda, that's not a lie. In heaven's Wakanda, if a girl falls in the middle of a forest and no one's around to tell her she made a sound, that girl still has a voice. That girl is gold. Whether or not anyone is watching, her skin isn't rust. Her time doesn't run out. It runs on and on and on. And her name is wherever she says it is. Her name is a song. She'll decide if you can sing it. In heaven's Wakanda, she doesn't die in a church. Her name isn't Addie Mae Collins or Yori Kochiyama or Cynthia Hurd. In heaven's Wakanda, she is heard. Loud enough to make lightning forget its own thunder. No one's rain leaves her eyes. In heaven's Wakanda, her face is a sky, and she decides who flies, or if she wants to hit a ball with a tennis racket. In heaven's Wakanda, shower water is brisk iced tea. We call soccer football. We call football masochism. In heaven's Wakanda, you keep your fists in its sheath. That good fight you've been fighting ain't so good no more. That fist you've been holding on to is something you can let go of. In heaven's Wakanda, me, my cousin, and the 2 guys he shot are all on a blacktop playing basketball with our fathers. In heaven's Wakanda, no one goes hungry. In heaven's Wakanda, no one says, yes, we can. We say, I do it again. In heaven's Wakanda, Jesus and Zeus play golf on Tuesdays. In heaven's Wakanda, my sister and I grew up in the same house. In heaven's Wakanda, we all grew up in the same house, all put cheese in our grits, all got beats in our hearts. In heaven's Wakanda, my uncle tells his heart to stop beating itself up so bad. In heaven's Wakanda, my mother has a day off every single day, a moment, a day right now does not have to end in a place like heaven's Wakanda.
Wow. You move us so deeply, emotionally, intellectually, creatively, politically. I am so grateful that we have your voice, and I'm just so looking forward to see how much more you have to give us. So one thing I'm gonna ask, first of all, thank you, Rashad. This was such a gift to all of us, and I'm so excited to be able to share now with my students this encounter with you. Writing is not a hobby, it's a job. Buy this book. Rashad, you're not allowed to send the copies. People have to buy books, okay? Buy a book.
Can you post in the chat where we can get it?
Gotcha. It's on Amazon, but I'll get a link for you.
Okay.
Yeah, you can get it. You can easily get it on Amazon, or you can, does the press send, you can order from the press as well?
No, they send it straight to Amazon.
Okay, so you can order it from Amazon. It's one click away. If you loved Rashad's poetry, as I know you did, buy his book. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. Okay, this is writers' work.
So it's on the chat.
Oh, you did it already? Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna be your promoter. I'm also gonna be teaching this book next semester in my creative writing class. So I'm gonna ask you to come back, Rashad.
Okay.
And we need to support writers like Rashad because he speaks not just for himself. He speaks for community, and his voice must be heard. So the way in which he has fed us today we support his writing. Thank you so much, Rashad.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you to everyone for coming, for being here. I am just so moved, so touched, and so energized as well. But I'm gonna ask Stephanie to bring the event to the close. And thank you again, everyone.
Thank you so much, Eddie. You're amazing. Rashad, you are amazing. You've inspired us, yeah, to be our best. So it's fabulous. We have, I'd like to thank Anna Carhart, our theater manager, Justin Tinker, our technical director, and Sabrina Sabalo, who's our box office manager. We have some great upcoming programs that Eddie is leading. A Nancy Caronia discussion on the 29th. And we have a conversation with an alum, Crystal Satal, who is an author, amazing author. And on October 22nd, we're doing a program in conjunction with the Jersey City Theater Center, JCTC, a conversation with the 9th floor playwrights and Professor Mark Dalio. And I'm gonna rope in Eddie to be part of the discussion too. So please join us at 11 a.m. And yeah, please check our website, njcu.edu/arts. And thank you very much for being here today. Have a great day and take the inspiration with you from Rashad.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Shade. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.